GS score,
GS score, GS score,
GS score,
GS score,
GS score,
GS score, GS score,
GS score,
GS score,
GS score है, GS score,
GS score,
GS score,
GS score,
GS score,
GS score.
GS score.
Hello all, this is Piyush. If you have been really thinking for 2026 UPSC exam, in that case, I believe that this is the best time to start your preparation. And as you all know, that when it comes to the UPSC Civil Services examination, optional does play a very important role. But then when it comes to optional, that brings the students in a very dicey situation or in a state of confusion that what optional they should go for. Undoubtedly, there are certain biases because of what people go for their certain biases, or you can say reservation, because of what people opt their optional paper. But sometimes there are certain students, they are very confused. And why am I thinking so, or why am I saying so? There's a very simple reason behind it, because sometimes I have noticed that students, those who have studied a particular subject for a longer number of years, since they have done their graduation or even masters, they're in a state of confusion that whether they should select this optional paper or not. Now, in this particular session, we are going to discuss something very specific, precisely for history optional. Now, what happens when it comes to history optional? It's a very popular subject, as you all know. And in fact, many since beginning, they are very clear that they have to go for this optional paper. But then sometimes, they are being misguided by some people, and then they're in a state of confusion that whether they should go for this optional paper or not. And I have realized this confusion in the mind of students, specifically when I notice certain students, those who have studied history in their graduation, their masters, yet they are so much confused that they have been thinking of taking another optional paper. So specifically, this particular session is going to help those students who are in state of confusion, or even those students who have decided to take history as an optional paper, because there are certain things that you need to know. When it comes to any optional paper, which is true for all the optional paper, but then precisely for history, sometimes students believe, or why sometimes I'll say most of the time students believe, that it is all about a sort of content. They believe that, okay, there are certain notes or maybe certain books, they have covered all those notes in the books, and they believe that their syllabus is done. But then if you have been really attempting UPSC with history optional precisely, in that case, there are certain things you have to be very clear of. Otherwise, you will be facing problems while giving the attempt of UPSC with history optional. So frankly speaking, if you believe that it is all about content, then it is incorrect. If you'll keep on seeing this optional paper just as a compilation of content, then it is incorrect. And in that case, there won't be any limit of the books, or let's say the reading materials, and you'll keep on struggling. That's why there are certain things that you need to think in the beginning only, and by thinking those kind of things in advance, or let's say in the initial stage, you can make your preparation very easy. So frankly speaking, if you believe that it is all about the content which is there in the books or the notes, it is incorrect, right? So basically, what you need to have the confidence, right? That if you're confident enough that my preparation is in the right direction, in that case, probably your performance would be also very good in the examination hall. And that's the reason because of what you have to work on somehow gaining the confidence in the optional paper. But the question is this, how to get this confidence, right? So when it comes to the confidence, for getting this confidence or having this kind of command on the subject, you have to very precisely understand the changing requirements of the optional paper. As I told you that majority of the students believe that they have just covered the things in a very chronological manner, and that's how the things are done. It is not correct, right? If you are having this approach, in that case probably you can't expect somewhere around 300 marks from this optional paper, and that's how listen the things very carefully, because that can shape your preparation in the beginning only. So as I told you that UPSC is evolving, the subject itself is evolving, and you have to prepare the subject as per the changing requirements. And that is the reason because of what you have to understand it. Couple of things I'd be undoubtedly discussing here, but at the same time, I must say that I won't be discussing anything as such that you can't understand by your own. If you have even a basic idea of the subject. In that case, you can see or you can compare the couple of papers of history optional, and then you will be able to understand the changing requirements or the changing nature of questions. And the moment you have conceptualized it, you have comprehended it, undoubtedly it's going to become easy for you, right? So let's talk about some of the changes which are happening in the UPSC, and to make you understand about these changes, I have just taken certain references from 2024 paper only that can help you to understand how come it is changing and evolving, right? So I believe that the questions are somehow covering certain new things or the new dimensions. So as per that, I have divided it into a couple of categories, and I'll be showing you some examples for it, and I'll try to make you understand that how to give a proper shape to your preparation. So the first thing I believe that nowadays they have started asking so many questions from the peripheral areas, right? What do I mean by peripheral areas? Let's say when you understand any topic, sometimes while studying we go for a very simplistic sort of understanding, or let's say content collecting. But then is it sufficient? No, because the way they have started asking certain questions from the peripheral topics, so you need to somehow understand what are the possible questions from a particular topic, and then you collect information on them. It's not necessary that on a specific topic you have been mastering, because that mastering is not needed. Ultimately, the answers that you are supposed to write, these are in 150 words or 250 words, max to max 300 words. So for 300 words, you don't need to collect so much information, but then you have to understand, okay, what are the possibilities of the questions, because now they have started hunting these kind of areas also. Let's see some of the examples, such as they have asked, as I told you that I have taken the questions from the last year only. So Harappan art contributes to our understanding of their aesthetic sensibilities in addition to spiritual and ritualistic life. Comment. Now maybe we have studied Harappan art. And in fact, why am I saying so? Because what happens, many students believe that history optional can be prepared just by taking reference from the PYQs, the previous year question paper. I'm not denying it. Of course, to a certain extent it is happening. But then you have to also carefully note it down that maybe the theme is being repeated, but something very different has been asked from that particular team. So Harappan art may be something which is a very common topic, but then it is not asking about simply the art, rather it is asking about the aesthetic sensibilities in addition to spiritual and the ritualistic life. Well, there's one thing which is being covered, but then apart from that, they have been asking something which is basically a debate. So undoubtedly it is a topic, right? But then most of the people avoid these kind of things. So this is how this is what being called by me as the peripheral topics. Let's see some other examples. Evaluate the contribution of Kandariyas of medieval Indian culture. Now we study Sufism, but then probably we do not focus much on Kandariyas. So basically, while studying Sufism, instead of understanding Sufism as a whole, I think it's good to understand Sufism in multiple perspectives. Or what are the smaller peripheral topics that should be covered while covering the Sufism? That is the requirement, what I'm trying to suggest you. Even in paper 2, let's see the question. After the Battle of Palasi, the mercenary became the kingmaker. Now, what is how smartly they have been framing their questions. Now, normally when it comes to Palasi, we always talk about one thing, that is the significance of Palasi. But then when you see the question, it is asking about the mercenary became the kingmaker after the Palasi. So it's a very, it's a topic which has been taken from periphery, and that has been framed, that has been asked in the UPSC. So that's why when you cover the topic, you have to be very careful of that what kind of topics are there in the periphery that can be framed in questions, because if you do not have, you haven't covered these topics, in that case it's going to be problematic for you. Let's say another area that is about the new dimensions. Sometimes what happens, they have been asking the new dimensions. New dimensions, what do I mean by new dimensions? Basically, these are the things which are not being covered by us, and in fact they are getting into a sort of complete new area, and they have been asking the question. Let's say this question, discuss the evolution of state institution and taxation system from Rig Vedic period to later Vedic period. Now it is asking about the evolution of state system and then the taxation system. So only by giving this information that how come the Bali was changing from the early Vedic period to later Vedic period, that won't be sufficient. Like, this is not having this much content that you can expect very good mark. It means that you have to understand carefully that how come this evolution is happening and what are the various factors which are facilitating these evolution. That's the most important thing. Let's see another question, like, that I have taken from the, modern part, that 20 years of peace secured by the Treaty of Salbai proved very costly to the Marathas in strategic terms. Now, mostly we go for understanding the Treaty of Salbai. What are the provisions? What are the, the various impacts and all? But then it is asking about the next 20 years and what problems the Marathas faced, specifically the strategic problems. Now, this is what being asked in the question. So, this is the reason because of what I believe, that the new dimensions, you have to have the idea of these new dimensions and you have to understand the new dimensions. Now, there is a new kind of questions that have increased in number in the UPSC paper, history optional paper these days. And what is that? These are very factual questions. Probably these kind of factual questions were earlier either not being asked, or I'll prefer to say that they were rarely being asked, but then these kind of questions are becoming so frequent these days. And these are basically these are coming from certain areas. Now, this is your smartness, that whether you are able to identify those areas or not. Let's see some of the questions, like, such as highlight the contribution of Aryabhat, Baramihir and Brahmagupta in the field of astronomy and mathematics. Now, this is the question. Now, normally we cover all these three. Where exactly we study them? Like, for the pre-preparation, and we just try to cram the name of their books. But then just by having the information on their books, we won't be able to write the whole answer. And that's how I hope you can understand that there are certain factual topics which are being asked. And again, I'm telling you that if you're smart enough, in that case, you'll be able to identify from where they can ask or they can frame these kind of questions. Because if you'll go for a sort of making a strategy, in that case, you'll be able to identify it. Like, analyze the contribution of Acharya Tirumbarat to Indian Vedanta. Now, these are very factual kind of things, and in fact, you have to prepare the optional paper, by keeping this also in mind. There is another aspect I'll say, that is highly analytical. Now, there are certain questions which are highly analytical. They are also being included in the paper, and undoubtedly these are taken from some of the precise readings, I must say. Such as, look at one question, the symbiotic relationship between Buddhist establishments, traders, artisan guilds and the royal support led to a close proximity of religion, economy and polity in the modern and postmodern period. Examine the statement. Now, it is asking you to make a connection between the Buddhist establishment, traders, artisan guilds and the royal support. So, there are four different kind of institutions. They have been merged together and you have been asked to find a sort of symbiotic relationship among them. So, this is a sort of very conceptual question. Now, precisely speaking, this is a question that has been taken from a book of H.P. Ray, who has categorically written included the same topic. But then being a student, it is not possible for us to go through all the books, from where we can collect the content. That's why, but if you have a very good conceptual understanding of the development, in that case, you'll be able to write the answer. In the similar fashion, we can, see another question. The course of the English industrialization was too long drawn to be considered as a revolution. A revolution. Comment. Now, these are basically the questions in paper 1 as well as paper 2 also. These are highly conceptual questions, and in these kind of questions you have to be very sound with the concepts, and if you are not very sound with the concepts, in that case it is going to be tough for you to score very good, right? Let's see another area, that is about the recent historiography. Now, these are the questions which are based on some recent writings, and again I'll say if you have sort of idea of the changing nature of the subject itself, in that case, you'll be able to trace these kind of questions also. It's not going to be very tough for you. Such as they have asked how did the Maratha guerrilla warfare tactics contribute to their military success against larger and more established armies. There are certain ideas we do have, but then frankly speaking, this has been taken from a historians writing, and in fact, like, he is one of the active historians these days, and in fact he has been writing a lot on the Maratha history, and this is one thing which has been covered, like, extensively by him, and the question has been taken from there. So that's how, like, we can say ki we should have some idea of the recent writings also, and how come they have been shaping the nature of the questions. In a similar fashion, political extremism in colonial India often converged with cultural nationalism, but not always. Now again, this is a question which is based on a recent historiography, right? So I must say that sometimes you have to have idea of these kind of things also, because if you have been covering the syllabus in such an extensive way, in that case probably your performance would be far better than others. So this was a very short session where exactly I was trying to hint that how we are supposed to tackle this optional paper. But then, as I told you, that I'll keep on coming with a series of basically workshops, YouTube lectures and the webinars. And in those lectures, webinars and the YouTube sessions, I'll keep on discussing extensively about these kind of things. So if you really want to follow, if you really want to get information from those sessions, in that case follow us. And I'll keep on exposing the things one by one, the various things related to the subject. So keep on following us for these kind of things. Thank you very much.